Hello and welcome to BDO Digital Digest, where as curious leaders, we're here to explore how evolving technology propels business forward and reshapes our work. I'm Julie Bilodeau, and I'm here with my co-host, Hamid Faghfoury. How are you doing today, Hamid?
I'm doing well, Julie. This should be a really good episode. I'm really looking forward to diving in here.
Oh, agreed, guys. I got to say, for those of you in the audience, we're diving into today's topic of the future of cybersecurity in an AI world. And we've got tons to talk about today. Really timely since the whole deep seek and all that has just recently come upon us, and we're starting to see the risks around that. So to lead us forward into this conversation, I'd like to welcome Mark Zuzarte, who is our BDO technology cyber engineering practice director. My goodness,
That's a
what
mouthful.
a yeah, what a mouthful. I don't know how he goes around and introduces himself and that 5 second elevator pitch or whatever we're supposed to know. I think it's a 5 minute elevator pitch, but
That's
I guess it
right.
depends on how tall the building is. So let's get Mark onto the stage and we're going to ask him to tell us a little bit more about himself as well. Perfect timing, Mark. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Julie.
So we just gave your really long title. Would you tell us a little bit more about yourself beyond that title?
Yeah, for sure. I'm one of the leads of cybersecurity here at BDO Canada. I'm specifically involved with running the teams that help organizations build secure applications, integrate security capabilities into their custom apps or into their organization. But on the other side of that, I help organizations with doing things like penetration testing or security testing that mimics that of an attacker, helping organizations find those critical vulnerabilities in their organization or their infrastructure before the bad guys do.
And then Mark, let's just dive in to one area because I know top of mind for a lot of folks is, enabling generative AI capabilities. Obviously, lots of exciting areas around that when it comes to the business impact. But from your perspective, obviously it's had it's reshaped cybersecurity in a lot of ways. How has generative AI reshaped both from an offensive and I guess from being able to be protected perspective when it comes to sort of cyber threats?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there are lots of different areas where generative AI and AI in general has impacted cybersecurity, but I'll focus on two, which I think are the two, you know, biggest or hottest topics right now. The first is, like, I'm sure both of you have been involved with projects where AI has been integrated into an organization. So an organization's brought on an AI engine to help them be more productive, help answer employee questions or
Right.
chatbots and things like that. When organizations are looking to bring those kinds of features on, um, typically we tell them, like, it's really easy. You install a package, click a few buttons, and away you go. What a lot of organizations aren't able to do, or maybe sometimes overlook, is making sure that that AI engine has the right amount of access. And when I mean the right amount, I mean the minimal amount of access it
Right.
needs in order to do its job. So let's use a bit of an example. If an AI engine goes and indexes all this data in an organization and it consumes HR data or payroll data, you in theory would be able to ask that generative AI capability, what does my boss make? What are the performance reviews of my peers? And sometimes, like, AI engines aren't able to have that knowledge or that capability around making sure that privileged information isn't shared with the wrong people. On the other side of that is what attackers are doing. And just like us, every day, I'm sure we're increasing our use of generative AI every day to help us do our jobs. We're going on, we're asking questions, we're saying, like, hey, like, tell me some information about an organization, help me write an email, help me build code. Attackers are then able to use those same features to build exploits or build bad software or phishing emails, things like that. So what we used to take for granted as a language skill or a coding skill, attackers are now able to just ask generative AI, how do I do this thing? Write me a malware toolkit, write me an exploit, it will pop it out. And the skill level of the attacker has really been able to go down because of the support of some of these capabilities.
And
Well, that's wild. I I
it's crazy, yeah.
I gotta say, yeah, sorry, that's the underbelly of AI, really, right? That of course it's unleashed, right? It's unleashed to the whole world, but that includes the bad actors out there who can just
Yeah,
take
for sure.
advantage of what that is. And of course, cybersecurity is top of mind when it comes to these bad actors getting a hold of that level of power, let's say.
Hmm.
Amit, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead if
No, I was
you
just going
wanted
to
to say more on that. But
reinforce the same thing. I mean, we see it on a personal level, obviously, with deepfakes and
yeah,
phishing just getting more sophisticated. I imagine what you're saying, Mark, is ultimately companies are seeing the same thing, right? What we're seeing in terms of scam emails or phone calls that are from from not so good actors. I'm guessing that this is the same type of sophistication that organizations are seeing on their side.
Yeah, for sure. And let's say, like you mentioned, phishing emails. Like when you would get a phishing email, one of the things that you would do is you look at that phishing email and say, it has spelling mistakes. It's not worded right. It doesn't seem to be tailored for my organization. Like it would say something about like a product or feature that you don't do, or you don't that
yeah,
you don't manage, right? So it would be an indicator saying, this doesn't seem legitimate. But now with AI having this intelligence, it's you're able to have like a properly written and perfect English email that has context about you and your organization. So all of those little tells that would indicate to you that it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't legitimate, those are
right.
all gone. And that was traditionally what we used to recommend to organizations to make sure that they to put into their training program around being able to detect some of those issues. But the world's changed.
So, are there like AI tools to help with these new tells, maybe that as humans we can't see anymore because it's that good?
Right. So I would say that maybe. So, like the short answer is yes, there are new tools and capabilities, but we're really in the trickle down stage right now. So, usually when these new tools or capabilities are released, they kind of come out right at the top. At the enterprise level, they tend to be pretty expensive, and organizations, like as the adoption grows and as costs come down, other organizations are able to adopt it. So right now we're in that trickle down stage where a lot of the tools and capabilities, mostly around like phishing and social engineering, they're still up there, but they're starting to exist, and AI is starting to being used to combat AI. But I would say that a lot of organizations that are concerned about AI and concerned about this new what we call the new threat landscape, they should really look at the investments that they've already made. And many of them have, just for like between the three of us, we've all made investments or, knowingly or not, into security capabilities. As the world changes, does it really make sense for us to continue to use the same capabilities, or should we reevaluate what we're doing to make sure that we're still doing the right thing, to make sure that we're protected? Like doing that reevaluation and making sure that everything's aligned, making sure that the right boxes are checked based on the way that the world is today is really important.
I got to say something that I do on my own, although I don't know, Mark, if this would pass your test, but if there's a phone number that I don't recognize, right, that's calling me, I don't
Hmm.
even pick up anymore. Like there's so much out there that I personally don't trust because I don't know. And I don't know if there's anyone else in the audience that's having the same, I guess, extreme reaction to this by having a zero tolerance for this. But for me, you know what? If they know me and I just don't happen to have their number already saved in my phone, I'm just going to let them leave a voicemail. Like at the end of the day, that's how I vet whether or not someone's trying to, a bad actor's trying to get at me, right? I don't know how
I do the same thing.
businesses can do that, but maybe you can give some insight into a case study or some other, some client that you've worked with in this kind of regard.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm sure we've heard of like business email compromise or wire transfer fraud. So an attacker would get involved in an email thread, or they would call somebody and say, "Hey, I'm the boss of this organization. I need you to wire transfer me, $100,000." And what we were training or what the industry was doing was telling people, look for the indicators, look for the tells that's not actually that person, the signature is not right, something doesn't make sense, the tone, things like that. Well, that's changed now with AI, right? That you can actually have an AI tool generate a conversation and play it to somebody that sounds like we've seen deep fakes. We've seen they all look really convincing. There's lots of them on YouTube. What you're So now what we say to or what we recommend to clients is that have a back end process. Make
Mm.
sure that
Mm-hmm.
you receive that call rather than just automatically doing what that person tells you, check with somebody else. Follow a standard process to make sure that the right checks and balances are in place. So even if like legitimately, it might legitimately be the CEO or the owner of that organization, but the right checks have to go in place to make sure that that kind of fraud is thwarted.
Before we get into Jenny's question, just one thing that came to mind is obviously it almost seems like a daunting exercise to keep up with the pace of AI, for example, in terms of the threat that poses. We're seeing open source models now come about. We're seeing a progression of access that can be used by good actors and bad actors alike in terms of being able to beef up their ability to use AI. How would you suggest that leaders can think about how they prepare themselves for the next wave of AI threats and other threats alike?
Yeah, for sure. So really, we can zoom out from the concept of AI and just think about the security threat landscape in general. The world's constantly evolving and changing. There's new cybersecurity threats coming out every day. So typically what we recommend to organizations, CEOs, leaders, is that they take a future-facing approach. So rather than protecting their organization from what's today or in the past, think about building capabilities that are resilient to threats in the future by not focusing on the actual threat, but building resilient security capability. So what that includes is doing things like data classification, doing risk management, having a robust risk management and data classification program, doing security testing, making sure that testing is done on a constant or continual basis to make sure that the threats that are actually existing in today's world are being considered and your organization is being assessed based on what those threats are. Having response and monitoring capability, making sure that if an attacker does target your organization, that something's in place to at least give the indication that an event is happening, so that some type of reaction or some type of remediation can take place. So future proofing and having an agnostic approach is really important.
Well, I think it's time for Jenny to get her piece in, because
yes, let's see.
Jenny's
She's
itching,
listening. We
and I'm
didn't
going to
tell
read
you, Mark.
this from Jenny. Jenny's has looked through your profile, has dug up your LinkedIn, has done her research, and she said, it's clear to me, Mark, that at BDO Canada you're helping clients navigate AI security challenges. And I think you've covered a bit of that. Her question is, can you share a real world example? You don't have to name names, obviously, with the client, but I guess she's looking for a real world example of how AI in real terms has helped strengthen defenses for somebody we work with.
Mm-hmm. So we have a client who they want to implement an AI chatbot, and their organization was really focused on having customers be able to triage customers so that they had to talk to less actual people, which would reduce cost because less people answering phones or responding to messages. And they felt that most of their clients could be served by this AI chatbot. Now, so this AI chatbot would have an integration into their organization through a custom web application, but they want to make sure the right checks and balances were in place and that integration was done securely. So what my group did in our application security team is we really helped integrate some of the security testing capabilities into their development pipeline and built some of the access control in place so that AI chatbot followed what we call the rule of least privilege, so that only the minimal amount of access that AI chatbot needed to do its job was provisioned to it, and the integration of that chatbot into the actual web application was as secure as it can be for today's standards, which was pretty secure. We went through a pretty rigorous testing process. Now, in addition to that, I notice I mentioned about today's standards. We're going to be doing iterative, near constant testing as that organization makes changes to the application, upgrades modules or integrates new AI models to make sure that that application stays secure, the right access is continued to be granted, and we have the right capabilities in place.
Alexa sounds like they're locked and loaded and ready for the future.
I am so relieved, Mark, that you and your group and our practice at BDO are around to help businesses. And that's actually what I think of next is if I'm a business leader right now or a business owner listening to this podcast, what advice do you have for them to move on this if they're really in their infancy when it comes to cybersecurity or or even data security at this point?
Yeah, well, I'm more than happy to have them talk to me. I would say that really keeping an ear to really an ear to the industry, understanding how their organization fits and what's important to them, understanding what the data severity level is, and making sure that they have the right risk tolerances and right risk appetite understood and communicated within their organization. I think that's really important. All of the other decisions really trickle down or are fed by those key decisions, which they're not even really, there's nothing technical about those, nothing that actually has to be built or computed. It's an understanding between leadership that this is where we are in today's world.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we've got to wrap it up there for today. We could probably go on all day on this, I'm sure,
We
with you,
definitely
Mark.
could.
But
And I'm sure I could talk all day about it.
exactly. I mean, you live and breathe this every day, so I'm sure it wouldn't take much, right?
It's exciting times.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. Thank you for those of you in the audience for joining us and tuning in today on our BDO Digital Digest. Join us next time as we continue to explore the future of technology and how it's impacting us day to day. Until then, stay curious, stay innovative, and bend that arc of possibility in your world. Thanks again.